Ritu ma'am, can you please? Oh, yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, welcome, ma'am. So, good afternoon, everyone. I greet you all on the occasion of National Energy Conservation Day and welcome you to today's expert lecture on thermal comfort paradigm shift in energy restrained world. I would like to take this opportunity to briefly introduce all of you with our today's expert, Dr. Ritu Gulati ma'am. Professor Ritu Gulati is an architect with an experience of 25 years in academics, practice, and research. She is professor at Faculty of Architecture, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University. Ma'am has successfully completed numerous architectural, heritage, and energy compliant projects. She has also authored many high quality research papers in national international journals. Ma'am is also the author and editor of extensive compilation of the Banaras Ghats, Kalinjar Fort, and courtyard houses of varied regions in India. Professor Ritu Gulati ma'am has been invited to reputed international forums and she has received many awards for her work in academia, practice and research. Ma'am is also the chairperson of various organizations like ASHRAE, IIA, LAA, and ICOMOS. Welcome, ma'am, and we really thank you, the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, Gautam Buddha University, for making and taking out time for us today. And we are honored to have you among us. Uh, Unfortunately, VC sir won't be joining us today. He's unwell. But we have with us Dean Planning and Research, Dr. Indu Priti ma'am. I welcome you, ma'am. And Dean School of Engineering, Dr. Kirti Pal ma'am. So first, I would like Indu ma'am to say a few words as a welcome note for Professor Ritu Gulati ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Very good afternoon, everyone. Our distinguished guest, Professor Ritu Gulati from Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, Dean SOA Dr. Kirti Pal, IIC members, faculty colleagues from GBU, and dear students, it gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all on this day, which is National Energy Conservation Day. It is celebrated every year on 14 December. So the purpose of the celebration is to actually showcase the achievements of the nation in energy efficiency and conservation, and to sensitize people about the importance of energy, as well as conserving or saving more energy by lesser use or by reducing energy wastage. At the same time, we are also celebrating World Energy Conservation Day globally to highlight the importance of energy conservation and its impact on the sustainability of global ecosystems. Um, we all know that energy affects all facets of activities related to modern life. We cannot think of a life or any kind of development without energy. It is actually the driving force behind all kinds of development in the world. And in fact, today the per capita consumption of electricity is considered to be the index for development for any country. So that's again an interesting fact. And therefore, the demand for energy, especially in the form of electricity and fossil fuels like petrol, diesel, gas, coal, etc., it is increasing day by day. And we all know that the sources of energy are limited and they are getting exhausted. So that's the aim of this day, that is to find out the alternative ways of generating energy, to sensitize people that how can they make efficient use of energy, how can they reduce the wastage. So while doing a Google search, I found an interesting case which I would definitely like to share with you all, because it is really interesting to know how the industry partners are reducing the carbon footprints in their organizations and how they are becoming carbon neutral. So Mahindra Group is one of the manufacturing industries, famous manufacturing industries, and they have a plant in Igatpuri in Maharashtra, and they became the first in India to be declared carbon neutral. And how they have achieved it, like I would like to mention some of the ways they have achieved this status. Of course, by making efficient use of energy conservation methods, the use of renewable energy, the waste and water management techniques. But there are many other things which they use to become carbon neutral. And some of them are, I would really like to highlight, like use of LED lights, which is very common, replacing old motors with new power efficient ones, replacing old heat ventilation and air conditioning systems with power efficient ones, using solar panels, use of windmills to generate electricity, use of LNG and LPG, installation of vacuum glass window. So these are some of the ways they were able to reduce their carbon footprints in their organization, like recycling of water, rainwater harvesting. So I think to synthesize, we must have many such examples so that these examples can be put forth before all other institutions and organizations, and we can follow each other's steps. So with these words, I would once again like to welcome our guest and Dr. Ritu Gulati ji and other participants, the faculty members. And I hope that this workshop will be very informative for all the participants and for all of us. Thank you so much. I'm not I audible? Madhuri, you are on mute.
Thank you, Indu ma'am. I think there is some network issue. Now I would request Dr. Kirtipal ma'am to say a few words, and then we can proceed with ma'am's lecture, expert lecture. Kirti ma'am, are you there?
Good afternoon,
Kirti ma'am, we can't hear you.
good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I take this opportunity to welcome our speaker, Professor Ritu Gulati, IIC Chairperson, Dr. Indur Preeti, all faculty members, and dear students. And I also want to congratulate the Department of Architecture and Regional Planning, School of Engineering, Gautabuddha University, for organizing this expert lecture on thermal comfort. As we all know that the building sector has the highest carbon footprints, with the increasing awareness about climate change and environmental concern, a lot of effort has been made through scientific and policy initiatives to reduce the energy intensity and carbon footprints of buildings. Since humans spend most of their time in built environments, indoor environmental activities, and so the role of human thermal comfort, health, and productivity increases. Global warming and environmental awareness also force the scientific community to look for ways to reduce energy use in buildings starting from the design stages. So, such kind of events, lecture, are key to share and promote knowledge and awareness about practices and techniques that can mitigate the issue. Once again, I would like to welcome our speaker, expert lecturer, Professor Ritu Gulati, and thank her for sharing her expertise and knowledge with us. I am sure that this session will be very interesting and enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirti ma'am, for your kind words. Now I would request Professor Ritu Gulati ma'am to start with the expert lecture and enlighten us with his knowledge in field of energy conservation. Ritu ma'am, are you there?
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for all those kind words all of you have bestowed on me. Thank you, Gautam Buddha University, for inviting me for sharing the thoughts. Thank you, Madhuri. We go back a very long way. Thank
Yes,
you,
ma'am.
Induji. Thank you, Kriti, for giving the accurate introduction to the need of energy conservation today and establishing the premise for the presentation that I'm going to give. So, shall I start sharing the screen, Madhuri?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We can proceed.
Okay. So how do I go about to share? Here I go. Mm. Yeah, is the screen audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great, great. So, a very good afternoon to all of you. And I'm presuming that there are a lot of students also who are listening to this, because they are the future torch bearers of whatever we talk about today. Energy conservation is something that we keep hearing since we are children, and everybody is talking about it. The global conclaves are happening on it. The entire country is worried about it as to how to reduce emissions, how to save energy, how to increase energy outputs, and a lot of technical stuff. Now, within this technical stuff, one of the most important things that we as architects would like to be interested in is thermal comfort, because we are designing for comfort. Everybody wants to have comfort. So that comfort may be, of course, of various types, of which thermal comfort becomes extremely imperative, especially in a country like India, where heat is one of the biggest problems. Now, for achieving that thermal comfort, we are using numerous energy systems, fuels, resources that we keep on adding. And, and we're using a lot of technical systems like vacuum pumps and glass types and solar panels and wind turbines and, a lot of stuff that is coming in. In fact, the whole construction industry and materials are based on developing these type of systems. Now, while we are all following that, and of course, it's imperative that we follow a lot of those technologies, it is also significant to understand what is really the need of that comfort. And are we doing something much more or over than what is required? There needs to be a paradigm shift in also thinking and understanding the levels of thermal comfort we'd like to achieve, especially when we are talking about a world where energy is a crisis. We don't have enough energy. And if you were to compare it with the other developing countries of the world, the develop you know the amount available with the developing countries is much lesser in percentage than with the developed countries. So what we have is a very small minuscule, and of course, in order to save that, we are developing new systems every day. So my presentation here will be slightly more commonsensical, and it will relate to also what we can do to reduce the demand of energy. So of course we need to provide for more energy, that has to be there, but how can we also reduce that demand? So slightly off track, I'd like to start on what we as human beings, what are we normally looking for all the time? We are striving, we want a promotion, we want a good rank in college, we want a certain award, we want money, we want whatever, whatever we are looking for is all driven at finding something in life. And that most important thing is actually happiness. We all want to be happy. And for that happiness, we'll go any way. We do vacations, we kind of buy the best cars possible, go to world trips, just to find that small elusive thing, which is called happiness. But then this is so typical of human beings. You look for happiness, you get it, and then you start looking for the next thing that is going to make you happy. So that quest kind of continues. So while in normal course we are looking at that happiness, we are also looking at that quest by architects and engineers when they're designing systems, when they're designing houses, when they're designing office buildings, when they're designing other structures. They're also looking for something, and that something actually is human comfort, because we are all designing for humans. Now, of course, animals, we talk about animals also, and we talk about their conditioning system, their physiological, psychological behavior systems. But essentially, we are talking about comfort. Now, this comfort has many parts. One is, of course, the physical or the physiological comfort. We should feel comfortable physically. The way we say it, the way we move, the way we inhabit any space should give us comfort. Second is perceptual comfort, which is more vision related. And we say that what we see should be comfortable. It has also some psychological aspect attributes to it, but primarily perceptual. And the third aspect, which a lot of, I would say, sensible designers are also talking about, is psychological comfort. That even if we are physically comfortable, we are perceptually comfortable, we do not have the type of psychological comfort we should have. So these three domains are being researched on a lot of forums, and numerous inventors, designers, they're all trying to find that comfort. In this lecture today, because it is Energy Conservation Day, today we'll be talking about thermal comfort more. And thermal comfort, of course, can be described as a condition of mind that expresses satisfaction with the thermal environment. So we should not feel too hot, too cold. We should just be comfortable, It should just be an optimum amount of comfort that we want to design for. And all through history, the recorded history, the scientists we talk about, we are looking at standards. What makes us really comfortable? So there are a lot of researches, a lot of experiments going on where people are trying to test what makes human feel thermally comfortable. And because of these standards, what has happened is that despite in history, once say we look at history about 100 or 150 years ago, we didn't have too much of science related to these comfort standards. And some of the most beautiful buildings of the world were made without knowing these standards. So we did not know whether 20 degrees would make us comfortable, or if the relative humidity was 75%, it's going to make us comfortable. But still, we were able to come and design and make environments which were comfortable to people, both thermally, perceptually, and sometimes psychologically also. And when did we really start thinking of standards? Because when the air conditioner was invented, this was, of course, after the Industrial Revolution, and with a lot of inventions. This guy was a genius who made the air conditioner, because I think controlling humidity and temperature together was something that we'd never thought of earlier. So when the air conditioner came in, and all those companies, those marketing strategies started, and they wanted to control, they wanted to find out what should the air conditioner be based on? Should it be at what should be the set points of setting the air conditioner values? And that's when this quest of this formal standard started coming in. So, like we've already said, thermal comfort is something which is extremely important. It also affects health. If you're exposed to hostile climatic conditions outside and inside, they will have physical and psychological effects on human beings, and people will remain disturbed, and their efficiency will also reduce. In fact, there have been various studies which have developed these relationships on how mortality, sometimes immediate and sometimes in a prolonged exposure to heat or cold, can have detrimental effects on human beings. This is regular. This, I think, even a child of class 6th or 7th would know. The environmental factors affecting thermal comfort, especially in an indoor space, will be temperature, which we call air temperature. That is the temperature of the air that goes around. The mean radiant temperature, which means that the temperature also has radiation. So it talks about exposure to the solar radiation or to sunlight. Humidity, that is and we normally measure humidity as relative humidity, which is in percentage, and airspeed. So all these four things simultaneously together will affect the thermal comfort of a human being within a space. Minus those four very scientific and very static factors, we have some 6 or 7 subjective factors which will vary from person to person. So in a given climate, those four things, including temperature, humidity, wind movement, and the solar radiation, will remain constant. But these 6 things, including the clothing of individuals, the activity they're performing, whether they're running, whether they're sedentary, whether they're, they're doing what type of activity are they engaged in, the gender, whether they're a man, a woman, or anything else, their health conditions, whether they're ill, whether, so their comfort levels will change. The type of food they eat. The entire Indian Ayurveda system talks about food, something as sattvic khana and tamasic khana, as to what will produce more heat in your body and what will not. The 6th most important thing that people will need to, which is an inbuilt thing within a human body, is acclimatization and adaptation. You will need to be adapted to a certain place to be able to accept the thermal environment more. So if I live in Jaipur and I travel to Kashmir, I will definitely find it much colder than people living in Kashmir, and vice versa. So the human body continuously undergoes this adaptation, and on this basis, there are a lot of thermal studies that have been done. So this is again a very scientific chart. I will not explain it in detail, except that there is something called a human thermal balance. So within the human body, if you can maintain the heat gain and the heat loss, you are at comfort. And that temperature is around 37 degrees Celsius. So all the convection, conduction, radiation that you have, which because of which you are gaining the heat, and the evaporation, radiation, convection that you give out heat with, has to kind of be balanced at a single value. So then what do we do? What do we as architects and engineers do? We design for a place, we design the envelope of that space so that we feel comfortable. So the outside climate will remain the way it is, but the inside climate can be managed, can be designed in a way where the outside hostility will not come in. And that is why we are constantly talking about insulation, openings, building form, roof form, plan form, heights, volumes, convective cooling, and a lot of other things. So to kind of achieve this elusive thermal comfort, which keeps on coming and going, we are continuously stressing, uh, thinking of our new ideas, looking at new discoveries and materials. This also becomes extremely relevant in the world, and especially in the tropical countries. So all this red that we see in the center of this map is actually the tropical zone. And the tropical zone, or the torrid zone as we call it, is facing the maximum heat. So actually managing the cold still becomes slightly easier, because if it's extremely cold outside, you cover yourself in layers. But if it's extremely hot outside, how much exposure can you have, and how less exposure can you have, is something that we are constantly battling on. Numerous scientific interventions that have happened for this assessment include the ASHRAE scales, the Bedford scales. Then there was the bioclimatic chart by Olgaze. We also had graphic scales. Then there was the tropical summer index, which was created by Sharma and Ellie. And of course, when you read up, you'll find there are many more things that have been done in the light of thermal comfort. The most significant one of late was the PMV PPD index, which talks about the predicted mean vote. And it talks about the percentage of people dissatisfied with the comfort level, and they try to record it. Now, most of these studies that have happened are the static chamber approaches. So if you were to describe the static chamber approach, it means that all the subjects, or the people, the way they call it, are kept in these chambers. Are kept in these chambers. Is there a problem? Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am, you can continue.
Okay. I hope the volume is not a problem.
No, ma'am, it's fine.
Okay. So when we are looking at the static chamber approach, we are looking at a closed room where a lot of variables are kept static, so that you can see the response of human beings and understand what makes them comfortable and what makes them uncomfortable. And then there is the field study approach, where people are kept in the working environments the way they are. And then a survey is taken to assess what makes them comfortable and what makes them uncomfortable. So of late, there have been more field study approaches, because the static chamber studies were not found to be useful, because you cannot keep people regulated in those chambers, right? They will go to the real world and they will behave as if they do in the real world. And while doing these field studies, it was also realized that these human beings that were being surveyed in these field studies were not just passive receptors of the thermal environment, but they were continuously interacting with it. So it was not a one-sided process. It was not just the environment which was affecting the people were also trying to adapt to that environment. And they were adapting by doing a lot of things. They modified clothing. So if you feel cold, the first thing you do is if you have another cloth at hand, another shawl, another scarf, you try to wrap it around you. They also altered activity. So if you are running and you feel hot, you'll slow down. You'll go down to a walk, or you might even stop, take rest. And these adaptations actually meant that we changed the life, we changed a way of life that allowed us, or the human beings, to survive in a particular environment. So if Jaipur or Jaisalmer or Bikaner or even Kutch, if these climates were extremely hostile, we would try to adapt to it because that is the place we are in. Similarly, if we are in extremely cold regions or extremely rainy seasons, regions or humid regions, we would try to adapt to it. So this adaptation or acclimatization could be defined as a complex set of physiological and psychological readjustments taking place in an organism on exposing it to stress, thus making it reset its body functions correspondingly. So if you've heard this story of a frog, so you have this saucepan which has water, and you've heated that water. So if you heat it to a certain degree and then you add a frog to it, the frog will immediately jump out of it because usko pani bahut garam lagega, right? But if you keep a frog in that normal saucepan of water and you keep it on heat, the frog will remain in the water till that heat becomes unbearable. So till that time, till the time you have that heat kind of, that less heat going to the body and coming back from the body, it's trying to readapt itself, making itself used to that hot water. But then, of course, when it becomes unbearable, you have a reaction. So even in thermal comfort, there is a theory called adaptive comfort, which relates human comfort to outdoor comfort. Mani, if you have a climate of a certain place, this theory says that people are ready to accept that the winters are going to be cold, the summers are going to be in such a way, and the monsoons are going to be in such a way. So they are kind of, their thermal expectations match the outdoor levels if they are acclimatized. And that is why they have control over their immediate environment, allowing them to adapt and prefer a wide range of thermal conditions than generally acceptable. And this adaptive theory also comes to a cyclic chart where we say that the central part, which is the thermal expectation, actually depends on thermal preferences, satisfaction, discomfort, which goes on to the behavioral adjustments. It also becomes a part of our cultural practices, and then it forms the thermal expectations again. And this leads to environmental adjustment, then the heat and cold loads, and forms again the past thermal environments forming the thermal expectation. So this cyclic thing is actually telling us that this is what is going to come, this is what is going to happen, and how should we react to it. So this comfort is achieved by the occupants adapting to the building or by the occupants adapting the building to suit them. So it's a to and fro process. So if I'm feeling cold, I may want to close the window. That is something that people do by themselves. So it's not, we are not just receptors. कि अभी हवा आ रही है, let the air keep coming in. We'll respond to it, right? We'll do some action to kind of change it. And of these studies, there was this researcher called Fergus Nicole, and he found out with all the research that he did for Tehran. Tehran is in Iran, which has a typical hot and dry climate, very, very extremely high temperatures. He made this survey in people who were working in the field, and he realized that the comfort temperature, which is the T-conf that you see in this chart, is actually different. It's much higher than the average temperature that you encounter. That means people are ready to face 20 degrees temperature in January. And if you look at July, they are actually ready to face almost 30 degrees temperature. They are comfortable in that temperature. So if you relate it to the average temperature, which is TOM, it's almost close to that. So on the basis of this, there were numerous equations that were found out. And the researchers established that within the range of the comfort temperature that you have, the range of 80% or 90%, it gives you a band of about 7 degrees. Mane, if you feel comfortable at 25 degrees Celsius, for the range of various subjective factors that you have in terms of clothing, in terms of acclimatization, ill health, there is a band of about 7 degrees. So you can actually be comfortable at 25 plus 3.5 and minus 3.5. So that's the range where the thermal comfort can vary. So this talks about the same 90% acceptability limits and 80% acceptability limits. So in contrast to the heat balance model or the static model, it was found out that the adaptive model was actually flexible. It was based on field studies. It could work for naturally ventilated spaces very well. And it was a function of the outdoor environment. So when we know that in Kashmir, it's going to be cold, we are prepared for that cold because we live there for about a longer period of time to be fully adapted to that place. Now we come to the energy aspect, as to why we are talking about thermal comfort. So of the entire energy that is spent, electricity usage is 13%, which is quite a bit. So we are using all this electricity just for giving comfort to our homes, to our offices, to our hospitals, to the other buildings that we are designing in. And of that electricity, 36% is spent on HVAC, that is heating, ventilating, and air conditioning. So that's a huge amount. And if you look at what India is going on, it's going on the path of cooling for all. This is a slogan given by the central government where they're saying that we will actually be giving everybody some substantial amount of cooling. So if you look at the demand in terms of the Indian context, where the population is among us and the number of people that we have are among us, within that, if we try to give cooling for all, it means a huge amount of energy to be there for to be able to give everybody a comfortable environment to live in. And if we compare the money spent on cooling, in the world, we realize that in India, at least 8% of the salaries we receive are spent on cooling costs because heat is so much of a problem in predominant India. So what is happening is that the outside temperature is 47 degrees at a lot of places, or the outside temperature is at 0 degrees Celsius. And we're trying to make our indoors comfortable by saying that let's put it at 20 degrees Celsius or 22 degrees Celsius, and at some places even 18 degrees Celsius. And we're trying to bridge the gap. We're trying to put in energy to cool that place from 47 to 18 degrees Celsius. And that's a huge task, especially when we are looking at a country like India where the population is tremendous, the climate zones are tremendous. We have at least 6 earmarked climate zones ranging from Jaisalmer, where the mean temperatures are extremely high, the diurnal variations are very high, and the humidity is much lower. And here probably we need to look at some of the commonsensical approaches they use. Because they know the weather is hot and they do not have access to too many energy sources, they would wear according to the weather condition, the climate. They would want to shade their head, shade their face a bit, wear white clothes, colored clothes because the desert is there. And all those things have become a part of our cultural system because of the years of adaptation that we have done. We like to eat food that can counter the heat because we'll eat spicy food, it will generate evaporation, and evaporation is going to give us cooling in that hot and dry climate. Similarly, if you look at the warm and humid climates of South India, West Bengal, the eastern and the western coasts, the temperatures are generic. They are not very high or very low. They remain 30 to 35 degrees Celsius, and the humidity is normally very high. So what do people wear there? People wear matlab the whole of Calcutta and Dhaka is famous for its malmal. It's a very breathable fabric, and you wear dhoti, kurta, everything made out of malmal. In South India also, you will wear the lungi, you will wear the sari, the things that are, and they can also be adapted. So you can, when you're feeling too hot, you lift the lungi a bit up, and otherwise it's at its normal length. And they eat very cool food. So rice, curd, fish, everything is non-heat inducing because there is hardly the humidity, evaporative cooling is absolutely negligent there. In the cold climate, the temperature is extremely low. People dress up in layers. They wear layers and layers of clothing, which is also called insulation. And they have very hot food, which will kind of rev up their metabolism to produce heat. Here I'd also like to share some of my research work from Lucknow. Lucknow is actually a composite climate like Noida, and you have 3 distinct seasons of the summers, which are very hot and dry, the monsoons, which are warm and humid, and the winters, which are cold and wet. And of course, all through the year, you've got these varying wind directions, predominant wind directions, which are east and west. And here I selected some traditional houses of the city. 3 types of houses, one being the bungalow type, where you've got a cluster of rooms in the center. They're consolidated rooms, and then you've got verandas around it. And you have the courtyard type of houses, which have one or two courtyards and are normally single to double storied, and the mud houses, which are on the periphery of the city, which are also made around courtyards and have verandas towards the outside and the inside. The study used survey and of the inhabitants of these houses, and they also used data loggers to record the environmental variables while the survey was going on. So a survey was taken of about 100 people, and all the variables were recorded in terms of the comfort. There was a huge variation in terms of the subjective variables of the people who were inhabiting there. Age groups were different, and there was a questionnaire which uh, delved into how they felt. So it was about how do you feel? Do you feel hot? Do you feel warm? Do you feel neutral? And it was all recorded in the span of the entire year for all the seasons. So we had it for typical hot summers, monsoons, and the cold season. The house types. So humidity, air movement, light. I will not go into the charts much in detail, but as you can see, there are these bars that go very high up. So the satisfaction levels seem very high even here. This was about the air quality, productivity, overall thermal comfort, winters, summers, monsoons, acceptability of the environment. And these were all traditional houses where people were living for generations. So they were totally adapted to the environment. And after the survey, it was realized for this entire year that this was done in about 2015. And it was realized that 81% people of that entire population that was selected, they were comfortable through all the seasons. And more people felt uncomfortable due to heat than to cold. Now, this was a very remarkable thing because these traditional houses did not have air conditioners. They used fans, they had windows, doors, of course, and they used a lot of passive methods to keep themselves cool, but they could not afford air conditioners, or there was no provision. It was not possible to install air conditioners. So they were relying on general passive cooling methods. So the environmental controls they used in summers meant that they could close and open the doors, the windows, the curtains, the lights, or the fans. In winters also, of course, in all the three seasons, they did the same. Could also use some semi-permanent controls like reflective paints, plants, wetted khas mats, shade to the windows, canvas tirpals, and local things that they could procure for the various seasons. They also did some actions, they also did some immediate actions. For example, if you're feeling hot, you can shift your position. You're sitting in this room, but you might want to shift to another room. You may change your clothing. You may change your activity. Then you might want to tie your hair up. You might want to drink some tea or cold water. You might want to have a bath. So all these immediate actions that they were taking were also recorded. The three seasons. And after all that survey was done, an equation was established between the existing comfort conditions and the outdoor environment features. And it was realized that there was a very strong correlationship between indoor and outdoor air temperatures. So that meant to say that people knew, uh, the comfort was totally dependent on the outside conditions. And and it was also found out that in summers, people could endure up to 33.3 degrees Celsius. So that's quite a high value. In monsoons, it could go to 30 degrees Celsius and almost 15 degrees in winters. After the survey, this was realized after all the data that was there. So it also proved that these occupants living in these traditional houses were widely acclimatized to the seasonal variations. So they knew the summers would be hot and they were prepared with it. And along with that, they took some environmental actions and some immediate actions to kind of make themselves more comfortable. Otherwise, they were happy with the situation they were in. So even if they were traditional houses and people were living there and probably they were their affordability level was also not high, this was a very I would say uh, significant finding that with the air conditioner companies saying that we should set, and you go to these multinational offices, the temperatures are set at 18 degrees Celsius, 20 degrees Celsius. And I see a lot of my friends carrying their coats and scarves because they feel that.
I hope
I request the participants to please mute themselves.
So there are these people who are carrying these woolens because they feel extremely cold in those environments. And those temperatures are actually set on the European standards where the outside temperatures are 4 degrees and 5 degrees Celsius. So if here outside we are looking at a temperature of 47 degrees and we are putting it to 20, it is still not comfortable because majority of people think it's being overcooled. So this type of a data where we get in to see that people are comfortable at 33 degrees Celsius is significant in the energy outlook, because if we have something outside which is 47 degrees and inside people are comfortable at 33, that means we are only cooling the air from outside to about 14 degrees Celsius compared to something which we said was 30 degrees Celsius. And even again, if we say that these are comparatively poor people with not access to air conditioners, even if this value from 33 went to 26 or 27, it meant that we have reduced the cooling demands to quite a bit, at least half the percentage. So this was established, this relationship was kind of mapped also, and it was realized that there was a strong correlation between the outdoor temperature. So it's said that the outdoor temperature influenced the state of comfort, and overall comfort temperatures for all the seasons were found out to be 26 degrees Celsius, 26.5 actually. There are some existing charts by researchers for other types of climates in the world, and they've done it for hot countries and cold countries also. And it was realized when this data of Lucknow was plotted in comparison to those charts, it was realized that the inclination, the black line that you see in this chart, is actually much deeper than the existing ones, because in composite climate, the climate is also changing tremendously. And that is why people are more acceptable to much colder environments and much warmer environments. This is again, so if we are looking at, a comfort band of 26.5 degrees Celsius, we mean to say that if in hot months, the indoor temperatures can be between 28 to 35, we are comfortable. And which is, I think, again, a very significant breakthrough. And it also tells us that thermal comfort is not just about heating and cooling. It's not just about that degree of temperature that we see on air conditioners. It is not just about the humidity readings. In fact, I had a lot of friends who would look at the newspaper in the morning and they would say, oh my God, the temperature today is 15 degrees Celsius. I need to wear 2 more sweaters. So it's not that data. It's about how your mind processes it, right? So we should also look at the need of this overheating and this overcooling, which is taking all this excess energy that we are putting into the buildings. So thermal comfort is actually about a mind that feels thermally comfortable. This can be derived by adaptation and being in control of your environment. So if in a space, if in an office building, which is an open office type of a system where a multinational company is, and I know that the temperatures will be set at a certain degree and I can't change it, I will be more fearful of that environment and I will probably overdress, because I don't want to get cold. And there are studies based on the same thing, that people actually feel they get ill because of that extra cooling that we are doing. So within this world of a tight fit type of an architecture, where we say that it should actually fit what you really need, versus a comfort fit type of an architecture, where we have enough, I would say, leverage to adapt. Money, of course, when I buy a dress, I want it to still be useful after 2 years. Suppose I gain or lose a couple of kgs. That's how architecture should be. We should allow our buildings to adapt, and we should let the people adapt it. We cannot create something which is so custom made that it cannot shift to our requirements. That also means that we should have a larger band of thermal comfort and not just those 20 degrees or 22 degrees, which have been established by the static chamber approaches for the world. And these varying circumstances in terms of the outside climatic conditions, in terms of the thermal expectations of the people, and there should be some added personal control to it also. And this is where probably we should respect the power of personal choice of the inhabitants of the space we are trying to use energy for. So there is a definite need of de-addiction to heating and cooling. Most of the times we are doing it because we have to do it, because it's kind of standardized in our mind, in the generation, as to that these type of set points have to be achieved. In fact, there is this new term which people have been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years. This is called thermal anesthesia. And here they say that instead of just comfort, which might be a sanitized comfort, there should be something called thermal delight in and outside architecture, which stimulates our senses. Sometimes you need a bit of a heat and a bit of a cold to have that contrast and be able to appreciate the space much more than just a regular static type of a environment. It's not a laboratory that we are working in at all times. And thus there needs to be a paradigm shift between understanding the thermal comfort in architecture, because it's not just about comfort, it's about pleasure, stimulation, and also some control of the environment. We should definitely think of moving from centralized to personal control, from a still environment to probably breezy air movement, from thermal neutrality, that means the static conditions, to a thermally delightful environment. We should also be looking at a passive design from active design. Meaning we should be using less active resources and more passive resources. We should also be looking at disengagement, moving to improved feedback. A lot of youngsters are disengaged. We don't care about the environment. We don't care about a lot of things that are happening around us. We need to have that feedback. We need to be able to change. So apparently, while we were looking at happiness, it was realized that the world's happiest man is Matthew Ricard, and he's actually a monk, and he's based in France. And there was this study done on him for years, because electrodes were put on his brain, and it was checked for the level of happiness in his brain. And it was found that he actually depends on just meditation for his happiness. He doesn't depend on any of those outside things. And true happiness actually comes from within yourself, not from someone else. And stop searching and start living was actually this. So in a type of world where we look at an environment which might be too hot or too cold, it's very difficult to find a perfect environment, except probably when you die. You just have to strive to something which makes you mentally stimulated and also comfortable. That's all for the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. And it's a very unique moment for me hearing you again after such a long duration.
Yeah.
It's been after 2009. I'm listening to your lecture.
Yeah, just a minute. I'm coming to the.
Yes, ma'am.
Should I stop sharing? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So I hope I was able to make some sense to the Energy Conservation Day, and I hope I was able to add some value to your efforts here.
Definitely, ma'am. Definitely. It's always very, a very mesmerizing experience listening to you.
You're just too sweet, Madhuri.
Thank you so much, Professor Ritu Gulati. It was wonderful listening to you. In fact, I could relate to my personal environment and personal life. In fact, that was really interesting to have this lecture with you.
Thank you so
thank
much.
you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Induji. Thank you.
I would request the
Thanks a
participants.
lot,
They
Ritu.
can
Madhuri, I am Atul Gupta. Thanks a
welcome,
lot,
Atul
Ritu.
sir.
कैसे हैं अतुल सर?
थैंक यू. मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हूँ एंड इट वाज ए ग्रेट लर्निंग. और रितु, मैंने तो तुम्हारा पहला लेक्चर अटेंड किया है आज. Good. A teacher is always a teacher, and it was really good the way you have put up things across to the students. I hope it will be a good learning for them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul sir. Now I would
Thank
request
you,
the
Madhuri.
participants to come up with the questions. If you have any questions for our today's expert, Professor Ritu Gulati, ma'am. You can raise your hand by using that reaction thing and we will unmute you. Was the lecture too explanatory? Guys, Radhika, you have any question for the ma'am?
एक्चुअली क्वेश्चंस ना होने की दो वजह होती हैं, तो कुछ भी समझ में नहीं आया, ये सब कुछ
Yes,
समझ आ
ma'am.
गया.
No, ma'am, lecture was good. Yes, Radhika, please continue.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. It was really a very good lecture and it was quite explanatory in itself. I do have one question for you, and that is during your survey of the houses of Lucknow, did you made any observations about the kind of materials that were used in those houses, or any specific construction techniques, or measures that were taken? So, if you may throw some light on that, it would be very nice. Thank you.
Yes, Radhika. They, in fact, the other part of the study was focused on the building envelope, where we talked about the various materials. They were all high thermal capacity materials with a time lag of about 8 hours. And the predominant passive strategy was thermal mass and night ventilation. And what they did also was that there was a lot of shading happening. So shading was a very efficient technique which they used either in the form of giving verandas or transition areas, and even courtyards used to give a lot of mutual shading. And the roofs were also shaded to quite an extent because of the adjoining buildings or the structures on the roof itself. So in fact, probably if you, you happen to talk about it at some other time, I can share that information also as to how that roof shading and materials were actually able to contribute to about at least 5 to 6 degrees of difference in the temperature, which otherwise a modern building would have not endured. So while any contemporary building would just give a difference of about 5 degrees from outside, the traditional buildings were able to give about 10 to 12 degrees of difference. So that was also there, that the indoor conditions were much more comfortable then. And that was a common strategy that was used in all the house types. There were different house types, but the strategies were common.
So basically, it would be good to know what are the materials that were used and what were the techniques. So I would really like to connect with you to know more about it.
We can plan one more lecture of ma'am.
Oh God.
Yeah, sure. It was quite interesting. So yeah, why not?
Do write
Thank
me
you,
a mail.
ma'am. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Ahmed Mehdi Mirza, sir, you want to ask question to ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. It was a good lecture, ma'am.
On your camera, switch on your camera, sir, please.
Ma'am, I'm not logged in from a device that has a good camera, so I'd prefer if it's without a camera.
Please. You can continue as the way you are comfortable.
Okay, ma'am. I just wanted to know, like, you showed us a graph that was showing the correlation between thermal comfort and the temperature range. So I was a little curious because thermal comfort, I suppose, would be gauged on some through a questionnaire, I suppose. So you would have like a categorical variable there, and the temperature itself would be a continuous variable. So how exactly is a correlation found between these two?
Well, when you plot it on the chart, there is something called the thermal sensation vote. So when we have this
TSV.
questionnaire, you've got the TSV. And then we relate it to air temperature, although we are also measuring the humidity aspects, but the normal thermal comfort surveys, which are these transfers and these longitudinal surveys, you talk about right here, right now, right? So you are actually recording those temperature values and you're corresponding it to the people's perception of the survey.
Okay, so it's a correspondence.
It's a corresponding thing. It's a corresponding thing, and then you plot it on the graph.
Okay. So, ma'am, standard tests for sphericity of the data, like you have Bartlett's test and all, these would be applied post hoc,
they
right?
were all applied. Yes. They were all applied.
Okay, ma'am. That's all I just wanted to know.
Yeah.
Gaurav, sir? Yeah. Please unmute yourself.
Hello, ma'am. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, you are audible.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the nice inputs that you have covered in the presentation. There were some points that I would like to know. You talked about wind direction, and you also talked about the sun. I mean, the heat and all temperature variations because of. So, is there any data that you collected with respect to orientation of the buildings in respect of the sun path as well as the wind direction? Because both go hand in hand, because eastern and western winds are there, and east to west is the sun direction as well. So, how was that, in relation to the buildings which are compatible with the directional orientation kind of?
Well, you might be very surprised to know that I actually did simulations also, and simulations with Energy Plus, where I took the energy account and the orientations of the building. So you might be surprised to know that for these buildings which are ground plus 1 or ground plus 2, orientation did not matter too much. In fact, it was almost negligible, and I think it is one of the most overrated concepts that we have, especially in terms of low-rise buildings. Because normally these are, especially the traditional houses, are located in labyrinthine streets. So they are in a dense, compact type of a settlement. And the other ones, the bungalow types, they are in dense vegetated sites. So till about 2 floors or 3 floors, the wind direction or the sun direction does not matter too much. So that is why I said, shading and materials became the two most important things that affected the comfort. The orientation with respect to wind and sun were not extremely important. So this is something that was derived from the study.
Okay, so it must be, applicable on high rise rather than
yes,
low rise.
Anything above G+4 needs to look at sun. And especially in India, we should be looking at the roof more than the sides.
Correct.
And especially for low-rise buildings. If you're making something below G+4, it's the roof that we should be bothered of, because that is where the maximum heat gain is happening. And if we are able to shade the roof, we are able to shade most of the unwanted solar gain from there.
Right. Thank you so much for the input.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gaurav, sir. Priyank Jain, you were asking a question to ma'am. Priyank, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Please on your camera.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Your lecture is good as always.
Thank you so much. Great to see you. You have joined GBU, huh?
Yeah, ma'am. He's working with us.
Oh, very nice. Very, very nice. Very nice.
Ma'am, I want to know the technique or material which we can implement on the tropical regions or the region where we live.
कहाँ पर? जैसे for example walls या roof, where? What?
Ma'am, on the walls and at the roof level.
You see, normally all these multinational companies and the marketing people would say you apply an X type of insulation and Y type of an insulation. I think for us, the most commonly used materials that are the bricks and the composite blocks are the best to use, because they've got high thermal mass and we have to reduce the heat gain. And after we've reduced the heat gain, we just need to have some type of a good ventilating system which clears that heat in the night. So if you're able to, predominantly use high thermal mass materials, we should be fine. On the roof and on the walls.
On the walls.
Yeah. Not too much of insulation, because insulation ke saath fir heat, it gets compacted and it doesn't escape too much. So it becomes a bit of a problem. Yes. So natural materials are, I think, always good.
Ma'am, जैसे natural material lime वगैरह, actually we use lime in some of the hilly regions, but in our region we use cement. So I feel कि lime is more breathable instead of cement, and the thermal comfort also achieved in case of lime.
I agree. So that is why the traditional mortars of lime, surkhi mortar, are sometimes better. Even mud mortar is better. So what we are doing, using here lately from a long time, is that we are using these cement stabilized blocks. So, it becomes a very good way of reducing the heat gain, also reducing the effect on environment, And also lime is not so very well used as of now, because the trained labor doesn't want, they're no longer very good labor in lime. So we have to look for, especially when we are doing conservation projects, we have to search for these trained labor. But yes, even if they're doing cement and we can kind of modify that cement to a more breathable variety, we should be able to work on it. I think conventional building systems are not bad, except that glass should definitely be reduced, because we are using too much glass, we are using too much steel, we are using too much of reflective surfaces. They should definitely be reduced.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank you for the
Priyank.
lecture.
Thank you, Priyank. There is some person I could see by name of architecture coming in the meeting. You wanted to ask question to ma'am.
Hello, Madhuri ma'am. Hello, Ritu ma'am. I am architect Gitanjali from Chandigarh University.
Gitanjali ma'am, this was
So
your
I
first
just
name.
logged in from my official ID, so that's why it's showing architecture,
Okay,
because
ma'am.
we
Ma'am,
are
please switch
from
on
the
your
same
camera.
fraternity.
Gitanjali ma'am. Gitanjali ma'am,
Hello
please
ma'am,
switch
how
on
are
your
you?
camera.
Yeah.
Good to see you,
Nice,
ma'am.
nice to see you. How
Yeah.
are you, ma'am?
Yeah, all good.
So my
All
only question to you, ma'am, that if you have explored building envelope efficiency, right, in your studies, so have you compared the contemporary materials with the traditional materials, and
Yes.
out of the results, what have you found out? I mean, because in the international markets, we are coming up with the cutting edge, materials which are like PCM, phase change materials, and also the polymers. So we are going to integrate these kind of materials in the wall systems, and also for the roofs and somewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So have you, ma'am, done any analysis based on these I mean the comparisons?
My study consisted of comparing the conventional materials of normal brick, cement, concrete to
Okay.
these materials, which were brick, lime, mortar, and of course the walls were thicker and the roof systems were different. But it was found out that the materials alone contributed a change of about 5 to 6 degrees. But I
Okay.
was not able to compare it with the modern materials of polymers and these
Because my
technologies.
research, ma'am, my research, because I am pursuing my PhD.
Oh, great.
So my research is also on the energy efficient residential buildings.
Oh,
But
great.
in the
Great.
composite climate only, but I have taken up the case study of Punjab,
Oh,
because
great.
I belong
Very
to
nice.
Punjab.
Very
So
nice.
I am also working on some building envelope strategies. So that's why I just asked you, because out of the, this seminar or whatever, the expert lecture, I can connect you for that later on.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you can guide me over that, so that would
Well,
be great of you.
my suggestion also is that, with my experience, I would say that sometimes conventional material systems are better, because a lot of these polymers have other side effects. You've got lots of toxic fumes coming in from there. We are already talking about VOC values and like that. So even if they contribute to reducing just about 1 or 2 degrees extra from the conventional materials that we use, it's not worth it in the long run, because we are actually polluting the air that we have. So it might be a good thing to use composite materials. Now, just say, for example, we are already working on some type of a composite material block which is generated from waste. So we are looking at we are already testing it in our laboratory, where we are looking at demolition waste and we are trying to make blocks out of it. So, there are lots of things which are happening in the world, but necessarily not related to polymers and plastics. My personal experience says that we should not use too much of these plastics in the building industry, because they, of course, have a detrimental effect on the environment. And two, it's a very, the building industry is a very sustainable industry. If we try to bring in a lot of international players there, the natural artisan and the craftsman also get lost. So it's not just about that degree of
I
temperature.
think out of your research, whatever the slides you were showing, it is more towards the eternal, I mean, the meditation and everything. So you are more connected towards that
Yeah,
aspect.
मुझे लगता है.
But
Actually, I talk about
yeah,
traditional
I
wisdom
also
quite a
could
bit.
find out the gap, ma'am. The conventional materials also have some deficiencies and they have the limitations. So I think there would be a good debate if we sit together.
Yeah,
So,
there should be.
so
Matlab, I'm
it would
not
be a healthy
saying no to
discussion.
technology at all. Technology has to come in, yes.
Yeah.
But how much and how and where is something that we need to decide, yes.
Yeah. Thanks for the inputs,
Okay.
ma'am. Thanks for your valuable
Thank you so much. Thank you.
inputs. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Madhuri,
Gitanjali,
ma'am.
ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. Ma'am, one last question from my side to you
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
like, since we all are academicians, and what we see in design studios that students are just copying up, or you could say just following what we are doing in West, and what currently out of commercialization the architects are doing are making the glass buildings. And we are talking about local architecture, vernacular, we are talking about sustainability. So, what changes in teaching methodology we should adapt to push, or to bring it in habit of our student to design the building, keeping in mind the point of energy conservation, sustainability, use of local materials? Because if they will use and they will look around their surroundings, so it is ultimately going to cut down the carbon footprints.
Absolutely, absolutely. See, I think it's a very relevant thing, Madhuri, because we are continuously telling them to do it, but then the world is pushing them to a different direction. So the
Yes,
concern is absolutely important. But I think the only way we should do it is by leading by example, If we preach something else and practice something else, it's not going to work. So you
yes,
look
yes,
at, and that ways, I think I'm very inspired by Doshi and Sept when they say that if we cannot do what we preach, that means we are doing something wrong. So
yeah,
I'm sure, and in fact, the current generation cannot be generalized to be doing what they're doing. In fact, I see a lot of talent in the young generation where they are ready to go that extra mile to achieve sustainability or to
yes,
work with local materials and work with local craftsmen. It's just about, I think, how much we talk about it, how much we talk about, how much we inspire them, how much we expose the स्टूडेंट्स टू इट फॉर एग्जाम्पल द स्टूडेंट से अभी पढ़ाई में तो चलता है जो भी आप सीख लोगे बाहर जाके तो वही करना है जो हो रहा है so somehow
exactly.
we have to be able to convince them or show them the way that this is not how it is done, and I'm sure it's going to happen, it's happening and it's going to happen again.
Yes,
अभी आप
yes,
देखोगे कि लोग ज्यादा बात करते हैं environment friendly materials की 10 साल पहले नहीं
yes,
करते थे,
exactly.
है ना?
And now UGC is also making some changes, that UG program should be of 4 year duration, and 1 year the student should get that flexibility to join any of the course they want. Like
Which is
I
good.
saw that one of the student in SEP, she was doing at BARC level only. So she designed some utensil of out of terracotta or clay. So she started working at ground level with the artisans,
Absolutely, absolutely,
and now they have
absolutely.
a startup of their own.
In fact, if you realize, so we keep on saying that architecture practice has a problem and, people are not getting enough jobs. It really depends on how much avenues you want to open. We have to become interdisciplinary. We can't remain in our bubble and say we don't care what the world is doing. We
Yes,
have to, we have to work with them. Yes.
yes.
So
Thank you so much, ma'am. And it was really pleasure listening you. and
my pleasure too, Madhuri. My pleasure
and I
too.
hope we will keep in contact and we will keep
Yeah,
on
yeah,
collaborating. We can
yeah,
even,
yeah.
ma'am, I would definitely like to have a collaborative studio with you, a collaborative design studio.
Let's think of something. Let's think of
Yes,
something.
yes, yes. Now, ma'am, we'll have just a quick screenshot with all the participants.
Yeah.
Can you people switch on your cameras, all the participants? Please switch on your camera so that we can have a quick picture with ma'am. There are more than 50 participants. Guys, please switch on your camera. Okay, fine. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. I'll share the recording with you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much, ma'am. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you to all.
Indu,
Thank you so
ma'am, would
much.
you like to say something? Or should we end up the
Yes,
meeting?
I was saying thanks to Professor Ritu, and we'll definitely be having few more lectures of yours, of course, in
Okay.
Department of Architecture, but at university level also, if we can do something, because
Okay.
these topics are of concern to everyone. So
Everybody.
thank you so much, Professor Ritu, for
Thank you,
being here.
Induji. Thank you,
Thank you,
Induji.
ma'am.
My
Thank
pleasure
you, ma'am.
also. My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
My pleasure. Thank
Thank you
you.
once again, ma'am.
Bye.
Okay. Okay. See you guys later.
Yeah.